To the Ben Breakfast Show. Well, it's now time to join our lovely guest. It seems this morning it's all about entertainment, but this is another angle of entertainment as I welcome Asha Hoyles.
Hi.
Hi, have I pronounced that correctly?
You have, Asha Hoyles.
Asha Hoyles, with a lovely voice. Well, you're a poet.
A performance poet, that's right.
Performance poetry. 25 years in the industry.
That's right.
Right, 25 years ago, I was JJC. Johnny just come to London. Right, I won't tell you the jobs I was doing, okay, but I was doing a certain job that you'd never imagine it was me. That's 25 years. I'd never thought I would sit on a Ben TV, in front of a Ben TV camera interviewing a poet. 25 years you're doing poetry. Before we talk about your book, you know, not a lot of African Caribbeans I've known get into poetry.
Okay.
There are quite a number of them, but most of them it's passion. Tell us your story. What led you into poetry?
Well, the number of reasons. The first one really is coming from a place called Chapeltown in Leeds, which never used to get very good press. Okay, they used to say that it was the place that you park your car and people take the wheels, you understand? So they didn't talk about the culture of the community. They didn't talk about the fact that our parents made us go to church. And I think my initial interest in poetry was really having to go to church, Sister Baker giving me poetry to read, having to practice reciting things on stage and things like that. So that was my initial interest. My other interest really came from having a condition known as dyslexia. And so when you're not necessarily doing that well at school, having another avenue to express your ideas came as something really, really important to me, really. And thirdly, the mixtures of the cultures is something that brought me to poetry. So people like Linton Kwesi Johnson, Benjamin Zephaniah, Jean Binter Breeze, Bernardine Evaristo, Cat Francoise. I mean, I could just go on and on. Mikey Smith, they have been inspirations to me as poets, you know. So being able to read poetry, love poetry, and then get inspired by the work there's so much work out there that has been an inspiration to me, really, in terms of performance poetry. But I would say family background and culture.
Oh, brilliant. Well, you've got a very good story there. But, you know, poetry to me, I'll be honest, I've, you know, gone to watch poetry, but then it's just been an event invited by a friend. What are you doing, Chinode? No, I'm doing nothing today. Chinode, jump in my car. Let's go watch this poetry.
I have to sell poetry better than that, man. Performance poetry comes alive.
But do you make money from poetry?
Well,
do you get paid? I mean, can you live off poetry and pay a mortgage, or maybe just pay for a basic council flat?
I don't think you should really come to any craft. I mean, obviously it's important to pay your bills. That's life. Whatever you're doing in life, you know, unless you're going to be homeless, you know, bills are important. But I think it's important that you come to your thing that you're interested in with a different kind of vibes. I'd like to think really that whatever was going on in my life, I would find a way to do poetry. And maybe if it
How can one make an income out of poetry? I mean, there are people...
Well, I've made a little. I wouldn't say it's made me rich, but, you know, if you get your bus fare home and a donut and a coffee, that's nice too, because sometimes it's about the inspiration. It's about taking something out there to the people and getting something far more richer than money. The response from the people, how they feel about your work, being able to, you know, often in life, you know, people think they're going through certain things or they're experiencing certain things on their own, and it's really wonderful to be around people who realize that actually they're not sharing on their own. Other people can identify and relate to it as well. And there's other things that I think, especially if you are not making a lot of money, you need, because you need inspiration. You need to be able to be motivated. You know, poetry motivates me to do things. I've been working for over 20 years in a sixth form college. I've been teaching for 6 years in a theatre. You know, the students have inspired me at the college, Newvic Sixth Form College. You know, the students have inspired me at Clean Break Theatre Company. So I'm a realist, you know. I got a job, I do the job, I'm a learning support practitioner and I'm a qualified teacher. But when all is said and done, the collection of the poetry is enriched by so many different people that have come from all different backgrounds that have gone on to inspire me, and I think that's important. But yeah, I still have to make a living.
All right, okay, before we look at this lovely book that you're about to launch, tell us,
Thank you.
You know, we're going to talk about this book definitely, but what inspires you when making poetry?
What inspires me usually is, you know, what I watch or what I feel or what I've seen. Something has to pull away.
Give us an example of what you saw and make poetry.
So, for example, I do a part, so for example, my mum, let's start with her. She has a beautiful rhythm when she talks. She has a way of communicating ideas that just kind of flow. You hear a rhythm and a naturalness of explaining ways of the world. I have dyslexia, but my mum has a way of getting me to understand things from a more cultural perspective. So if she sees me doing one thing in a certain way, she can tell me 20, 30, 40 other things from it. Do you understand? And when I was growing up, they're the sort of things that I remember. They then play a very important part in your survival mechanism. I left home very young, you see, so you need all these different kind of strategies and techniques and ways of looking at the world to help you navigate them. And I just think that, you know, she has been really very influential in that. And that is really at the root and the passion of my poetry. And also, failing in the school system, knowing what it's like to meet teachers who say, you will not amount to nothing, and I can't understand your work even when I put it the right way up. You understand? So having a culture that allows you an opportunity to express yourself in the way that is accessible to you and makes you realize that you've got a voice, that I think that's fantastic. And if you can share that with somebody else, it doesn't get better than that for me, really.
Brilliant. Well, let's look at this book, of course, Raise Up the Law, Asher Hoyles' performance poetry, including CDs, Bring Down the Mighty. I'll just read this bit here that sounds nice. Still arise. And I, a woman, the brain is the bling. Poetry is everywhere. Now, tell us about this book. What inspired you to write this book, and what angle are you coming from in terms of what message do you want to send out from this book?
Okay, well, I think one of the messages that I want to send out really starts off with something I said to you about growing up in Chapeltown, where people used to have negative press. There's been a lot of negative stuff about the Windrush, for example, and our positive contribution that we've made to society. I think that book is a celebration of the positives that don't usually get mentioned, a way of communicating stories that I...
And what are the positives?
Well, the positives are the language, the kind of concepts and things of which the sort of subject matter in which you can talk about. I've been able to, the book is divided up into sort of like my life in performance poetry, and I suppose in a light-hearted way. So the beginning section is, you know, when I was first living at home, living amongst my community and so on, what it was like to then come to London for the first time as a youngster and what London used to be like. And then my progression, which I hope at the end of it all, people will realize that I'm always on the side of the poor. I'm always on the side of the down-pressed. I'm always going to be on the side of the people who don't have a voice. And if you can inspire people to think, well, actually, you've got an opinion, your experience in your life matters, and to be able to use the collective culture in which to present those ideas, I think is wonderful.
You are very well spoken.
Thank you
I wish
so
you were
much.
my English teacher.
Thank you so much.
Right, okay, now your poetry, I mean, there's different types of poetry. I mean, I used to watch a friend, may Soros in peace, DK, a Nigerian poetist in Manchester. Okay. And he was quite hilarious with his poetry. It's like when he starts performing, you just start laughing. And you'll be using the punchline, using one word, and then, you know, repeat. So how would you describe your poetry? Like what?
I think if I was going to describe my poetry, I would say it was passionate. I don't think I necessarily write humour, but I know there's bits in it that's funny. But I think it's probably because of the way that I express it. It's just Asher being Asher. It's not like being an actress where, you know, you can put makeup on and, you know, be someone else. I think poetry kind of exposes you in a way, because you can only go up there and be you. You can only go up there, but you bring all that tradition of body language, of the spoken word, because I don't read, I recite usually. So those ancient traditions of being able to recite things, you're celebrating things like memory, you're celebrating the opportunity to celebrate your body being an instrument in its own right before all the other things. So you bring performance poetry to life through circumstances. Most people who listen to my poetry will say, oh yeah, these are stories written from a passionate place, somebody who's lived this thing. You understand? It's not just, I can't make up stuff in that kind of way.
I'll just stop you there, enjoying the poetry. Let's go for a quick break, and when we come back, we continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Ben Breakfast Show. Well, we're still with Asha Hoyles, our lovely poet
Thank you.
from Yorkshire. Now, she ran away to come to London.
Yeah, true.
Right, well, let's look at the book, Raise Up the Law. In this book, you talk about youth, racism, and sexism. Let's start with the youth. No wash your mouth over youth. Tell us more about that.
Well, that's a poem that I wrote. I was inspired by a program I was watching, a kind of news item where one of the MPs, I cannot remember his name, but he was being so derogatory and so negative about young people. And I remember him saying that what they need, you know, they wear too much hoodies, they need throttling, they need this, they need that. And it just didn't seem to be positive. You were saying earlier, you know, what inspires me? It's things like that. And I thought, there's an expression that we use, don't wash your mouth over youths, which basically means don't be so negative. Don't be so, do you understand what I'm saying? So I thought, no, let's tell the story about how youths are viewed, and maybe we could get a little bit of an insight in why they sometimes respond to the things in the way that they do. I'm not saying that they're necessarily always right. I'm just saying, let's start off on a better footing. I expect people who are in a better position to be a little bit more positive about young people and lose the negative language that is sometimes used around youth. Now, when I was growing up, the expression that people used to use was, no, wash your mouth over you, no, wash your mouth over people, stop talking about people. So that's where the inspiration for that came from.
All right, and another one is racism and sexism. And do you think, the world is fighting racism?
We're always fighting racism, whether it's subtle, whether it's underground, whether it's institutional racism, whether it's blatantly in your face. I mean, I know some people are saying that, you know, with mixtures in relationships and this and that, racism is being eradicated. I personally don't believe that. I think racism is something that we're challenging, battling all the time. But I do meet people who their hearts are in the right place. They don't realize that they may be being racist because of the way that they've been brought up or how they understand the world, and you explain certain things to people and you find that they're quite happy to move on to another path. There are some others, I'm afraid, no matter what you say to them, they're racist and that's that.
Great. Well, still looking at this lovely book, it comes with a CD. Mm-hmm. It should have taken you not 25 years to write the book.
No.
It took you some time. What are the difficulties you faced when writing this book? What are some of the setbacks?
Well, I think the first thing really was belief in myself, I suppose. Can I really pull this off?
Is this your first book?
Yeah, this is my first book on my own. I've co-written, but this is the one that I've kind of done on my own. And what's so interesting about Asha's life that deserves a whole book in itself? And, you know, I think I've been very blessed to be around people who, when I'm having these little shaky bits of doubt, you know, I can refer back to, like I said, the work that I've done at the college, the work that I've done at the theatre, the students, the husband, and people saying, you can do this, man. Your experience, it counts, it values, you can do this. It's hard because I have dyslexia, like I said, my memory's shocking. So, you know, to be able to recite poetry is a challenge to me. I wanted to be able to celebrate the language. Maybe some people complain that I don't do it justice, but I just wanted to try and encompass something. It is a challenge when you're doing it on CD in a studio maybe, and you're not actually doing it, which I usually do, performance to an audience. So, but I wanted to try and get the best of both worlds so that people could follow. If you've got dyslexia, you're not a big reader, but you still want to hear the poems, then you can hear them and you can kind of follow. Do you understand? So I think it's that kind of, maybe that little bit of teacher and education in me that's saying, well, how can you cover ground? And having that understanding of people's challenges, you know? You know, if you're not the best speller in the world, my book will be fine.
And I'd like to know, like, how you write poetry.
I build poems, a bit like, I'm very much influenced by, you know, the sound system, kind of back in the day when you just go on the mic and do your thing. That was really my first experience of performance poetry for me, you know, just being more political. So I suppose that has really stayed with me. But I build poems and then write them at the end. So I'll be doing the lines to myself. I'll be kind of chanting to myself and going around, building it up bit by bit by bit by bit. And then when it's finished, I get the experience to know what it's like to write something down, because then I write it down.
So what would you say has been one of your best performances, something that has not just given you some financial muscle, but, you know, sometimes it's not about money, sometimes it's about just you've enjoyed this particular performance? Which one was it?
I've done a few in my time, but I have to be honest, the one that I did recently to launch the book, which we did at the MAP studio in Kentish Town, if I'm allowed to say that, and People came from my workplace, people came from the community, even where I get my coffee from in the morning, the people came from the shop to come and support me. And the love I felt in the room was just incredible. It really was so supportive. I think that was one of the nicest performances because I was so well received. I was pacing up and down before the performance because everybody was all right and I was a wreck as usual. So even though I've been performing for a long time, I still have them same nerves. Yeah, you know. And so when I looked out at the people who had come out and taken the time out to come and support me and to come and root for me, whether they're the Camden crew, New Vic crew, Clean Break crew, you know, if it had flopped, I don't think there would have been anywhere in Cambridge.
Actually, talking about a flop, that brings me to my next question.
Okay.
Now, you know, we live in a realistic world where sometimes things like poetry, people are not just aware that they exist. So, you know, that's me. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ashley Hoyles. And people probably try and boo you or just don't show interest. How do you, you know, handle a situation like that? Because people are not really, it's not their fault.
Well, coming up into the business in the first place, because as you said earlier, I've been doing it for 25 years, so I know what it's like to perform in front of all different types of audiences, some who are not receiving you very well or are receiving you very well.
Yeah, I'd like to know those who are not receiving you well.
But the ones who are not receiving you, you're passionate about, you want to say, and to be honest with you, you're nervous, but you get to the end of it. It's all part of the training ground, I think. It's all part of the training, yeah, and part of life is dealing with different types of people, and you learn things about yourself. You know, it might not have necessarily have been the best performance in the world, but the point of the matter is that you had other options. You could get nervous, you could run off, you could start to stutter, you lose belief in yourself, you know, and all those things. But if you see the person go, what are you there talking about? But you still carry on, you're committed, you do the poem, you get to the end of it, you say, thank you very much, goodbye. You know, you learn something about yourself.
Yeah, well, what about other poets that have inspired you? Could you mention a few? That,
oh, my goodness, there's so many. Jean Binter Breeze, Linton Kwesi Johnson, Benjamin Zephaniah, Mikey Smith, Jackie Kay, Caroline Duffy, Liz.
Oh my God, we're just going to go on until Christmas.
Oh,
but tell us, why do you think these have inspired you?
Because they made their information accessible. They seemed to have their finger on the pulse. They were telling the stories. They were telling something of our experience that was different from what was going on in the media. And they made me feel inspired, and they were celebrating their cultures, they were celebrating their backgrounds, so people like Derek Walcott.
Right, okay, hang on. We've got something here for you. Now, let's see if you're a poetess, right? This is Ben TV.
Right.
Give us a freestyle poetry on Ben TV.
I can't do a freestyle, but I'm going to do one that I love doing because it makes me think of my mom.
All right, okay, there you go. The stage is yours.
Okay, then, so this one. Girl, you got to learn to think for yourself. Spin and turn your hand. You're not going to reach the party on time and late to reach inside God's house. Learn to do the small things and the big things will come after. And while you're living underneath my roof, you're not to talk back to your mother. Your father puts the bread on the table. I beg all you have some manners. You don't see how you does make me vex when me see you don't have no conscience. But I'm not going to live forever. And who can't hear must feel. Better that you come inside and pick up a book and keep your tail part off the street. For the teacher said you get 0 out of 10. That not sound too good to me. 0 out of 10. 0 out of 10. You're not even going to get to sweep the streets. And I'm looking at my face when I'm not talking to you. You need to learn to mind your business. You had the right in your hand and you lose it now by the way you went about it. Yes, you can hide from a thief. Yes, hide from a thief, but what you going to do with the liar? Better that you get yourself baptized and follow the good example of your sister. For the other day, I nearly shut your box. When we hear how you did talk to the minister, when him ask you if you want to get baptized, and you tell him, say, you don't want to waste the water.
Well, thank you so much. Well, listen, that was so brilliant. Listen, Asha, time not with us, but, after the show, I think I need to get more lyrics from you. Who knows?
No problem.
I might want
Bless you. Thank you so much.
I might want to write a song.
It would be my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, that was Asha Hoyles as well, who said poetry is boring. Well, it's definitely not boring if you get this book, Rise Up the Law by Asha Hoyles. Well, details on that, you could email the studio. The email is flashing right in front of your screen, or call us. Well, for now, I'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we take our last guest. Stay with us.